Welcome back, everyone. In the first micro lecture of this module, we're going to turn our attention to the discussion of stimulant-type drugs. In the last module, we focused on CNS depressants, which tend to have the opposite effect on our bodies compared to stimulant ones. We will go through and explore these different drugs one by one, beginning with amphetamines. Let's go ahead and get started. To begin with, we know that stimulants are most commonly called uppers because of the effect that they have on our bodies. Essentially, they give you an increase in energy due to a release of dopamine throughout the body. Stimulants wake you up, these energize the body, and they get you moving. These drugs can be licit or illicit in nature depending on the type of stimulant that we're discussing. Most of us use a stimulant of some kind on a daily basis. Are you tired from staying up late? Have an extra large cup of coffee. Want a small pick-me-up? Go get yourself a pop. These are licit recreational drugs that make us feel a little more awake and ready to take on the day. But if we're talking about more illicit types of drugs, those are the ones that are going to be scheduled as either a Schedule 1 or a Schedule 2. Remember that Schedule 1 drugs have no recognized medicinal value, and Schedule 2 drugs do have some recognized medicinal value, but still have a high potential for abuse. Let's start by discussing some of the more specific drugs that fall into the stimulant group by focusing on amphetamines. Earlier in the semester, we discussed the common use of amphetamines during World War II as a way to keep soldiers moving and marching for hours on end without getting tired. They can cause dependence due to their euphoric properties and their ability to mask fatigue. Amphetamines can be legally prescribed by physicians, but abuse occurs in people who acquire their drugs by both legitimate and illicit means. Amphetamines first became famous at the end of World War II when Germany used them as a last-ditch effort to try and keep troops walking, even when they were exhausted. German soldiers were giving military-issued pills made from methamphetamine and a primarily cocaine-based stimulant. In 1938, a Berlin company named Temmler introduced Pervitin, a methamphetamine drug which became very popular in both the German military and civilian populations. The effects of amphetamines are similar to those of the adrenaline produced by the body, triggering a heightened sense of alertness. In most people, the substance increases self-confidence, concentration, and willingness to take risks, while at the same time reducing sensitivity to pain, hunger, and the need for sleep. Methamphetamines were also widely distributed to pilots who flew during the Blitzkrieg attacks on London, which allowed the pilots to fly longer distances and drop more bombs on the city below. Japan also gave methamphetamines to their kamikaze pilots before they would go fly suicide missions for their empire. After the war, amphetamines became widely popular among truck drivers so that they could haul long trips at night, and are a popular ingredient in some diet pills. A person who is taking an amphetamine-based drug masks their fatigue but often experiences a crash later after that drug wears off. Therefore, you want to take more before that crash happens. Amphetamine use can be licit or illicit, but all of these drugs that do require a prescription to gain access if you're not buying them on the black market. Two of the most common amphetamine drugs, Ritalin and Adderall, are both big among college populations so that they can stay up all night working on papers and studying for exams. But for many, these are largely taken without a prescription, just by bumming a pill or two off of a friend. Pharmacologically, they are meant to treat ADHD by increasing the ability to focus and pay attention. If you need to be able to get a lot of work done in a hurry, you can imagine the appeal of this type of drug among those who have procrastinated and waited until the last minute to start their work. So how do amphetamines work exactly? When you're taking an amphetamine drug, it creates a synthetic chemical experience similar to the natural release of norepinephrine, dopamine, and epinephrine. Norepinephrine, in the most basic terms, the function of norepinephrine is to mobilize the brain and the body for action. Norepinephrine release is lowest during sleep. It rises during wakefulness, and reaches much higher levels during situations of stress or danger in what has been called the fight or flight response. Dopamine in the brain, dopamine functions as a neurotransmitter, a chemical that is released by nerve cells to send signals to other nerve cells. Epinephrine, also known as adrenaline, is a medication, a hormone, and a neurotransmitter. As a medication, it is used for a number of conditions, including anaphylaxis, cardiac arrest, and superficial bleeding. If it's inhaled, epinephrine may be used to improve the symptoms of croup. It may also be used for asthma when other treatments are not as effective. It is given intravenously by injection into a muscle, by inhalation, or by injection under the skin. So more of these chemicals are being released, but they are not being metabolized. So there's an increase and a pileup of these chemicals in the body. This results in an increase of euphoria until our bodies begin to metabolize the drug. Then the crash occurs. Stimulant drugs like amphetamines affect the peripheral nervous system, which is part of our nervous system that consists of the nerves and ganglia outside of the brain and spinal cord. The main function of the PNS is to connect the central nervous system to the limbs and organs, essentially serving as a communication relay going back and forth between the brain and our extremities. These chemicals are released into the brain, they pass through the central nervous system, and then into the peripheral nerve system. The peripheral nerve system is responsible for passing neurons throughout the body. Because our bodies are highly stimulated, a few things may occur when these drugs are consumed. First, fight or flight instincts often kick in at a high rate, meaning our natural desire to run away from or confront possible threats. But the issue here is that we are synthetically experiencing this. So what if there are no threats? The drug makes you feel as though you still need to react that way. Your body typically feels a level of euphoria. Your whole body feels pleasure. But sometimes you have a bad experience and the euphoria doesn't necessarily kick in. Instead, you end up feeling anxiety or panic as a result of the drug. This can be described as a bad trip or a bad experience that is related to the drug. This can also be attributed to a drug that is mixed with something else or may be laced with an unknown substance. So, if we can take them to create a recreational euphoric high, then what are these drugs actually meant to treat? First, narcolepsy. Narcolepsy refers to the condition in which an individual falls asleep spontaneously. So if you're falling asleep, then let's wake you up and keep you up. Next, as we already stated, these medications can be used to treat ADHD in children and in adults. Ritalin and Adderall are two of the most famous amphetamine-based ADHD drugs. You might think this is a bit of an oxymoron, as people with ADHD tend to have increased energy levels to begin with. You might think you want a depressant for those patients, but treating with a stimulant provides a stronger ability to focus and keep calm. Finally, these can help with weight loss, but many drugs with amphetamines have been taken off of the market because of the number of negative side effects that are associated with them. If you take an amphetamine, the drug will decrease the appetite center in the brain, which makes you want to eat less and subsequently lose weight. So going back to our German military example, we see a group of soldiers with high amounts of energy and focus with a substantially decreased appetite. This is convenient when your supplies are dwindling and you have trouble getting food to your troops to begin with. Like everything else, amphetamine use is not without a number of negative side effects. The largest and most dangerous side effect that comes from stimulants can be seen on your heart, blood pressure, and damage to blood vessels. The more you stress your heart and increase your blood pressure, eventually something is going to blow out. So if you take amphetamines too close together or for too long, your blood pressure will get high, resulting in a stroke. If your heart rate gets too high, you run the risk of a heart attack. If you remember from our conversations on opioid overdose, it is a much more peaceful type of overdose. Your body forgets to breathe, and without oxygen, you pass away. But with stimulants, the overdose is much more violent and hurts a lot much more when the user dies. So while we're on the topic of amphetamines, let's take a quick look at the closely related methamphetamine. Once taken, methamphetamine actually breaks down and metabolizes into amphetamine. So individually, they are two different drugs, but are chemically very similar to one another. There are many different drugs in methamphetamine and a wide range of chemicals that can make this drug extremely potent and dangerous to use. Because of the way that meth breaks down into amphetamine, drug tests which show a presence of amphetamine are often considered a positive indication of methamphetamine use. Methamphetamines are commonly made by individuals in their homes. It can be manufactured through household items and over-the-counter ingredients. Namely, you need to get pseudoephedrine in order to make methamphetamine. You can purchase that at any drugstore and you do not need a prescription to buy it. Pseudoephedrine is found in most antihistamines, and you need to be looking for the one with the letter D on the box. So Sudafed D is the higher amount of pseudoephedrine compared to regular Sudafed. Either way, it is regulated, as we will discuss in more detail in just a second. Meth is easier to get and lasts longer than cocaine does. It comes in crystal form and you can smoke it. Meth is often a very volatile and dangerous drug due to the chemicals that are used to create it. But if you don't know what you're doing, then it is really easy for meth to explode and you're throwing chemicals everywhere. Toxic chemicals in such labs pose a threat to residents, neighbors, law enforcement officials, and the environment. The same chemicals that you're using to create meth are also sitting in your body for a long while. They are working to corrode your teeth, and that is one of the easiest ways to identify a meth user, by their teeth. Meth breaks down your teeth and corrodes your gums pretty fast. We actually call this meth mouth. Pseudoephedrine is still regulated at pharmacies, and they run your driver's license through the computer. That regulation is a result of the Comprehensive Methamphetamine Control Act of 2008. This was originally passed in 1996, but was then renewed in 2008. The act accounts for the precursor chemicals of ephedrine, pseudoephedrine, and phenylpropylamine. Try saying those 3 times fast. The statute also includes the following requirements for merchants who sell these products. First, they have to keep a retrievable record of all purchases, identifying the name and address of each party to be kept for 2 years. Second, they must require verification of proof of identity for all purchases. And finally, they required protection and disclosure methods in the collection of personal identification, meaning your driver's licenses. But because of these restrictions, people have had to come up with newer ways to make meth. Shake and bake meth. You don't need to cook meth if you do need to cook meth if you make it the traditional way. You don't need a flame when you're making it shake and bake style. The lithium strips from the battery serve as the cooking mechanism when you shake and bake. What does shake and bake actually mean? What else are you able to shake and bake? Chicken, pork chops, etc. How do you make it? You put it all in one bag and you shake. Shake and bake meth, or one-pot meth, needs a lot less Sudafed, and it can be made in a 2-liter. It is still very explosive. You can see the Sudafed, iodized salt, a regular battery and lighter fluid, heat or antifreeze, sometimes includes acetone, and hydrochloric acid. This is used in a lot of chemical cleaners available at Lowe's or Home Depot. That basically is all you do here too, but you use a 2-liter rather than a bag. Things to know about shake and bake. When you make this, it is still highly volatile. You put all of these chemicals together, you add the lithium, and things are going to start cooking. Depending on the batch that you make, it takes somewhere between 1 to 5 minutes to make shake and bake meth. You also need to put a lid on your pop bottle. By doing that, you're trapping all of the gases inside. If you don't take the lid off periodically and allow those gases to be released, then you're going to cause an explosion. On the course website, I have provided a short video clip that shows you how shake and bake meth is made. Go watch it if you would like to see the process for yourself. More recently, we're seeing a further shift in the production of methamphetamines through the use of liquid meth conversion labs. Traditionally, when meth was cooked from scratch, it was a highly volatile practice with a strong odor associated with the drug. Think back to Breaking Bad. Where did they cook their meth? Primarily in an RV in the desert far away from everyone. This was done for two purposes: explosions and the smell. That's also why they cooked in their underwear sometimes, so the smell would not linger on their clothes. Now, through the use of liquid meth conversion labs, some of that risk is removed. In these labs, we see a conversion of liquid methamphetamine to a crystal substance. The conversion labs start with pure methamphetamine in liquid form that has been smuggled to the United States, primarily from Mexico. So the initial risk of creating meth is removed, and now all that is left is to heat it into crystal form. Acetone is one of the primary chemicals used to create crystal meth in this case. The conversion process is still dangerous and can still result in explosive material, but there is less risk associated in comparison to the traditional ways that meth was cooked in clandestine drug labs. From 2015 to 2019, the DEA reports that there has been a 340% increase in liquid meth seizures during that time. This runs counter to the data that suggests the number of meth labs is on a decline during the same period. Why? We turn back to the idea that the liquid can be smuggled into the U.S. easier, and there is less detection for those cooking as they don't have to keep seeking over-the-counter ingredients. That means those who are connected to the Mexican smugglers are more likely to keep their labs up and running compared to those who are cooking from scratch. In this first micro lecture of the module, we have briefly explored some of the concerns that we see with amphetamines and its cousin drug, methamphetamine. We still have a very large problem with meth use in the U.S. and are struggling to keep the emergence of conversion labs under control. In our next micro lecture, we will turn our attention to more of the designer stimulants, and we'll finish the lecture by focusing on cocaine, the differences between powder and crack, and the sentencing discrepancies that we see between those two substances.